So this is a training session from Monday the 25th of January. I'm training shoulders and back. I'm back to my first day of the training split. It was quite a dangerous commute to the garage this morning with the amount of snow on the driveway, but I made it just about with my 17 layers on. Luckily the garage wasn't too much colder than normal. It felt completely the same. The bars were still pretty cold, but after doing a couple of sets, warmed up pretty easily. Now, before my first exercise, I did some shoulder breaks with the band just to get my shoulders warmed up, did some scapular pull-ups just to start activating that back, and then a first warm-up set with 20 kilo bar, doing some front overhead press and then behind the neck overhead press. I did 5 working sets of overhead press, one set of 35 kilos for 10, one set of 40 kilos for 10, then I dropped the reps down and did 2 heavy working sets at 50 kilos for 5 and then 55 for 5, and then final set backed it off back down to 40 and did almost 10 reps. I think I got 8 out. In my top set of 55, it was a very intense set. Every rep was difficult, with probably the ability to do one more rep or maybe 2 at the top, so an RP of 8 or 9. It felt good to be pressing 55 kilos again. Wasn't the easiest it's moved, but felt pretty good. And just like in all my sessions, starting off with a compound lift, in the final clip you can see how much is working during an overhead press. It's not just a solely shoulder press, it is a shoulder press. My triceps are working, my back is working as well. So I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck from just one exercise, which is really important when you care about strength as well as gaining muscle mass. After my overhead press, went on to my first back exercise, which was a seated row. When I do my seated row, I like to get a nice stretch at the bottom, so a slight lean forward into really drawing everything back at the top, driving my elbows as far back as possible. It's important when you do this to make sure you're not picking up too much momentum, because that's just going to take away from your muscles working and you'll have to use a ridiculously heavy weight. My first 2 sets were with just 30 kilos and I was hitting between 15 and 20 reps depending on how it feels. Obviously the slower I did it, the harder it was going to be. Then 2 heavier sets at 40 and 45 kilos where I was hitting between 10 and 12 reps. I chose to do a seated row today rather than a barbell row or something similar, just because after overhead pressing I don't want to overdo it on my lower back. I don't want it to be crazy fatigued and me and my later on exercises suffer because of it. The next exercise I did was a landmine shoulder press, which I did focusing on my side and rear delt. Now I did this by more of an arcing motion rather than keeping the barbell in front of me, using mostly that front delt. I brought it down to the side. This makes the exercise slightly harder, but gets that activation on the weaker delt muscles, which is very necessary, especially with the other shoulder exercises I did this session. I did 3 sets of 10 on each side. I started with 10 kilo plate on it, then I went to 12.5, then I went to 15 for the final set. My left side definitely felt weaker, so it was very doable for my right side, but a bit of a struggle on my left side. After the landmine shoulder press, I went on to a lat pull down, which is a bit of a struggle without any leg support, but I try and make do. It means I can't move as much weight because the weight starts to pull you up. This time doing lat pull down, I started with some partials where I'm just working the bottom half of the movement just to get a nice activation in my lats, get them ready, and then move on to a full range of motion. I find this is a better way for my body to feel it out the best. For the lat pull down, I did 3 working sets of about 12 reps, depending on how it felt. My first 2 sets were with 30 kilos, and then my final set was with 35. On to the last 2 exercises, which were a rear delt fly, which I like to do sitting on a bench, leaning over. It was quite hard to do because my back was already pretty fatigued, but it's better than nothing. I did 3 working sets of about 10 reps, and it was coming pretty close to failure. I find that's quite easy to do with these kind of exercises if you're focusing the right muscles, because the rear delts are so small. They don't take much work before they get to that fatigue point. Then my final exercise was an alternating dumbbell front raise to hit the front delts as much as possible. I was getting about 8 to 10 on each side, and that was taking me very close to fatigue. When I'm training shoulders, I try and make sure I have one exercise that is more front dominant, one exercise which is focusing on the side and rear, just to get a good amount of variety, because I know the front delt can take over as it is one of the more stronger muscles. And that was my session done. Overall, pretty good session. Felt good to move some heavy weights, especially with the overhead press and the seated rope. Look forward to coming in and doing chest and arms in the next couple of days. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you, and hopefully you have a nice day.